Hi, welcome to the Finding Harmony podcast. I'm your host, Harmony. I'm here with my very funny little podcasting voice today.
Your podcasting Padawan.
Yeah, it's like all these podcasts have transformed my voice into some kind of strange low vibration, that's husky phone voice.
It's the lurgy.
It's the lurgy.
So I understand that you have Nikki Barada back on the radio today.
No, I don't have Nikki Barada with us.
Nikki from Leeds, right?
No, we have a beautiful woman from Kent.
No, she's not from Kent. She's from Yorkshire.
Yorkshire?
Yeah. And I hate to break...
But living in Kent.
I hate to break the... No, she's living in Leeds.
Didn't she say Kent?
Leeds University.
Where did I get Kent from?
I have no idea.
Oh my God.
But I had a whole bit going and you broke it by being completely...
Should we just start again?
Sideways. No, I don't think we should start again. So Nicola Nixon is from the north. Just like Nikki Barada was. And so we're going to have... Are they
both from Yorkshire?
They're both from the north. You can just say the north.
Oh.
And it's grim.
Well, where's Kent?
It's in the southeast. It's right next to Essex, just like a little bit above Essex, which is just almost due east of London.
You know, it's a small...
London is very south.
It's a small island, but there's like a lot of places on it.
No, they're fucking southerners down there, and it's the south. Pardon my language. Hi, Nicola.
Hello. This is like an amazing geography lesson for everybody, isn't it? Like bonus.
So where are you actually from?
Yorkshire. For fuck's sake, listen to the words I'm saying.
And I'm from a town called Huddersfield.
Huddersfield.
That's right.
And thank you. And where are you now?
Still in Huddersfield.
Okay.
Oh my God.
That's amazing.
Oh my God, we went over this. This is the third time. And
we need like a little map, don't we? We should have a little map with little pins in it so that we can see where we are.
She has the lurgy. She's not sleeping well. She's not good. And and I told her, like, we should just call it a day and, like, go back to bed. And she's, no, we've got to do the interview. Be nice. And I was like,
that's not how I talk.
That's how you talk. That's how you talk.
I don't talk like that.
You'll be nice. If we just have an interview, be good. Have a little talk, a chat, to be nice.
I'm not Welsh.
It'll be ever so lovely. I don't want to do it again. And it's like, all right, fair enough.
Are you like a professional accent person then? Is that your sideline?
That's right. He's trying to get picked up, you know.
I am trying.
He wants his own show.
I would like to be picked up.
Yeah, we need to practice a little.
Yes.
So for those of you who don't know you, you're ever so nice. Nicola Nixon, no relation.
To President Nixon?
I'm sure her parents are also named Nixon. Yeah. Nicola Nixon is the yummy yogi, a reformed finance professional, an enthusiast on gut biomes, mum of two, and a handmade tyke. Isn't that nice?
Well, do you know, you say handmade tyke. That word is, I've heard it, but I've had to look it up, and you know, you're right. It does refer to Yorkshire people. I think it's the next town on who call their football club the Tykes. But I had no idea where it came from until I looked it up. But apparently, the Southerners used to refer to Yorkshiremen, meaning we were rough, coarse, and slightly unpleasant. How rude is that?
It is rude. It's an Old Norse term, tick, which denotes a female dog.
Whoa.
So the Southerners would have called the Yorkies back in the olden timey days, Utred. They would have called them those bitches, right? And the ticks from up north.
That's brutal.
And so we are a little concerned that is it tyke or is it tick?
Tyke.
It is tyke. We are concerned the tyke might be derogatory, so I don't want to.
Yeah, I think it probably is. Yeah. I think you're right there.
But why is it a handmade tyke? What does that mean?
Because she's
a maiden.
She was made in Yorkshire.
Oh, handmade.
She's also a handmaid. Isn't that a clever bit of wordplay? Isn't that lovely? Yeah.
See, look, a frustrated accent impersonator and a frustrated poet as well.
It's true, among other frustrations. So, I guess you would have just grown up like normal folks in Yorkshire, eating fish and chips, bangers and mash, bubble and squeak, all that.
Well, I think the bangers and mash and bubble and squeak, definitely. My grandparents were butchers, and so therefore we had an abundance of meat, and we also had allotments, so all the veg were there. It was a very meat and two veg kind of upbringing. We didn't have anything fancy.
And by veg, chips, mean potato
and peas.
Peas as well, and marrows, because you couldn't control the growth of the courgettes. They all became marrows. So we were quite limited in our diet, I would say. And fish and chips were quite a treat.
I'd say so.
We only ever got that when we slept at grandma's. We didn't we didn't have that as normal food. But yeah, I think nothing was ever wasted. We didn't have a lot of money growing up, and so everything was used. All of the scraps of the veg and the meat, and I think that's where my cooking came from. My husband laughs because he says I can make anything out of what everybody else would scrape and put into the bin. And I do. It's nice. Wonder, don't look like that.
There's a couple of things that I think need translation for our audience. I wonder if you could describe for our listeners at home, especially for Harmony, what an allotment is.
Oh, right. Okay. Yep. An allotment is a piece of land where anybody can go and grow their veg or keep their chickens, or they're really lovely little communities, and they were particularly popular in Yorkshire. It's where men of a certain generation had their man shed, and they all went to socialise with each other. Cool. And so, as a child, my mum and dad used to drop me off with my granddad, and he used to take me down to his allotment, and we used to chase chickens and pick peas and eat them raw.
That's such a nice community building thing.
And by chase chickens, you mean like going after the birds, like really flirting with the girls and
no.
Real
have you ever tried
chasing chickens? I've choked a chicken, but I've never chased. Wait, I don't. You have to tear their heads off. Yeah. Maybe you could tell our listeners what's a bubble and squeak, because that's a lovely term.
It is a lovely term. It's basically the leftovers from what would have been a roast dinner, the vegetable leftovers. So you'd have some potatoes and maybe some greens like Brussels sprouts and the odd bit of carrot, and you mash them up together and form them into like a little patty, and then either fry or like nowadays would bake them. But yeah, they're really nice to use up all of your scrapings that would normally have been thrown away.
And they kind of squeak a bit too because of all the cabbage and like they make a sound, don't they?
That must have passed me by. I don't know.
No. I'm sorry. I thought I'd heard that. Honestly, I thought I'd heard that.
It's so fun, listening to you talk about the traditional English sort of dinner, because my grandparents on my father's side always had the roast dinner every Sunday, and we would all go over as a family. She'd make the Yorkshire pudding and the gravy and the roast and the peas, carrots, potatoes, maybe Brussels sprouts.
Yes, in winter, yes.
Yeah.
Canada is a bit more British than America is my impression.
Okay.
Yeah, they carry.
So a lot of people would have roast dinner on Sundays.
They're
with
quite
their families.
They're quite progressive rather than having they
regressive like the United States. Right,
exactly. they progress rather than progress. It's funny.
But yeah, it's a big tradition.
Yeah.
Is a Yorkshire pudding, is that a bit like French fries? Do you have a different word for it?
Oh no! Oh my word! Yorkshire pudding.
You know what a Yorkshire pudding is.
The holy grail of dinners, and that here defines how good your cooking skills are. If you can make a decent Yorkshire pudding, then you're sorted for life.
Oh my goodness!
That was my favorite as a kid. I would just eat like 3 of them with gravy.
Yeah,
but you wouldn't just
everybody
call
it here.
But you wouldn't just call it a pudding because you're in Yorkshire. It's like, oh, have a pudding,
and then still call it Yorkshire pudding.
No, it is a Yorkshire pudding. You're quite. It's because they don't call it. They call them frites in France.
Yorkshire puddings.
French fries.
Oh, French fries, right?
Yeah, they don't call them French fries.
French fries were chips.
They are chips
in England.
Frites. In France, en français.
En français,
yeah.
Right, but that's nothing like a Yorkshire pudding.
No, it's not.
No, but you see, it's named from the location that you live in.
Right.
So you wouldn't call it Yorkshire per se. It's like just pass the pudding.
No.
But pudding is something else altogether. It's like dessert.
Dessert.
But pudding is dessert, and Yorkshire pudding is your Yorkshire pudding.
But if you're in Yorkshire, you're not going to say pass the Yorkshire pudding because you're in Yorkshire. You do.
Yeah, we do.
Good God.
We're so proud of it as a culinary dish that
you should be. It's like the most delicious thing that ever came out of England.
Now, our one listener, Martha in Florida, she may not know what a Yorkshire pudding is. Could you describe it? And what makes it really good?
Okay, and don't forget Valerie as well. I'm just going to say hi to Valerie.
She'll love that.
Valerie, founder of the Finding Harmony podcast. Yeah.
So for Martha and Valerie, a Yorkshire pudding is a batter made from flour, milk, and egg. And the secret is to get it really whisked up so that there's lots of air in it, and to get the fat in your oven so hot that it smokes. And then you take your little dish out, pour in the batter, and put it in for about sort of 15-20 minutes, and it rises up into a great big puff of deliciousness. I don't know how else to describe it.
A puff of deliciousness.
Yeah, puff is a derogatory term for homosexual.
Not that kind of puff.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, we used to make them in the muffin tins.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I know. Yeah, there isn't anything better, really.
I haven't had one for ages.
Oh, you should. Do you know what? Yeah. I discovered recently that they're really nice with like a chocolate spread on. So for actual pudding, dessert as well with the roast with gravy.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah,
we're really struggling with language in this episode. Translations. It's funny.
We're all speaking English.
So that sounds really nice, though. That you grew up with, being able to go off with Gran and your granddad and go off to the allotments, and it sounds like a really like beatific kind of upbringing. Where when someone says the North, they really rather grim, isn't it?
Oh, it's not grim here. It's really green. It's absolutely gorgeous. We've got like the rolling green hills and all of the, like the lovely little, there are some grim places in the north, but there are grim places in the south as well. But here, it's really lovely. It's green and beautiful. And so all those spaces where people grew the vegetables were just a lovely place to be.
Yeah.
I'd rather vegetables. I think I'm going to start saying that. That's nice. Because
what do you say?
Vegetables. That sounds funny.
Vegetables.
Right. You just remove the A altogether.
Yeah.
Get it out. Just schmutz it together.
Yeah.
Vegetable.
Yeah.
It's like cauliflower.
I don't have cauliflower or roller coaster, as Harmony likes to say. Cauliflower. Roller coaster.
Cauliflower.
Vegetable. Let's get on with it. So growing up, like, what did your parents do? It sounds like you guys were just having a really rather nice time up there.
My dad was a plumber.
That's a good profession.
So yeah. Well, he was kind of an industrial plumber, so he worked on industrial sites and things like that, as opposed to people's houses. And when we were young, Mum didn't work, and then later on she became a school secretary. But they were really young when they had me. Mum was 19. And so I think that, they still had some of their living and growing up to do. And so when Saturdays came, we were kind of flung at my grandparents. And, Mum and Dad went off to do whatever they did, child-free, whilst Grandma and Granddad had us, for the weekend, which was, they were just great fun times, really. I was really lucky with my childhood. We didn't have very much money, but we had a lot of fun. And, it's amazing what chasing chickens can do for your fitness.
Totally.
So that's fantastic. So you were rather good at school, weren't you? You were sort of excellent, and that just sort of came naturally to you.
It did. I've always been a really hard worker, and I've always been a really driven kind of person. And so if I set my mind to achieving it, then I pull out all the stops and I make sure that I do that. And the academic side of things just came quite naturally for me. But because nobody in my family had ever been to university before, there was no precedent for any of that kind of thing. It was just sort of a, I've done really well in that, and now just move on and get on with my life. There was no expectation that I should go to university or further my education at all. It was just sort of go out and get a job.
So that was interesting. When you brought that up in your bio, it's sort of a couple of times now. Harmony and I have talked about this, having working class parents ourselves. My dad was a mechanic, and hers was an electrician. The enthusiasm for school was, I think, misguided. We would have been much better off in a professional career, but it had this kind of grandiose dreams, go to college, that'll be great. do whatever you want, enjoy your life. And I think it was really naive, and they should have said to us, go get your law degree and really focus on that. Do something where you can, really change things for your class, permanently. But going off to fucking art school is a terrible idea.
My parents did try to brainwash me into becoming a dentist.
Oh, did they? Now that's really well thought out.
I really hated dentists, though.
Yeah. And so I feel like immigrant families, they come in with a much more directed focus. You're going to school for a particular result, and that'll be much better for you. And
but there are an awful lot of unhappy lawyers and doctors who've been forced down that route, who then need therapy and and yoga and all of these other kinds of things, because they've been forced to do something that they didn't really want to do. Whereas I suppose from the other, if you can drive yourself and inspire yourself to do something, then you're going to be happier, aren't you, doing that than being forced into a route that's just not right for you.
Or you could be a disgruntled painter who's also just as
you just need to raise your vibration.
Oh, right.
Just make sure that you don't cut off your ear or anything like that to be famous.
There's low vibration.
There's
high vibration. There was nothing wrong with his paintings. He just needed to be a nicer guy.
They're contradictory sort of. Well, you're making a strong argument, for that. But as I understand it, you weren't necessarily so driven all the time in your pursuit of academics. You were sort of something of a party girl as well.
Well, I think what happened was, when I went out to get a job, I decided I wanted to be a banker, because, we'd just come out of the 80s and it was just all fun and excess, and it just seemed like such a great thing to go and do. And I think the culture in those days in banking and finance was very driven by business in the pub, in the wine bars, and it was just that kind of an atmosphere, and it was great fun. Terrible for your health, but great fun.
I had a very similar life experience.
It's true, actually.
I also went into banking and wanted to be a banker. Right. I actually wanted to be an investment banker. That was like what I wanted to do. But I started off as a teller and then worked my way up to like a personal banker. And then after about 4 years of that, I was like, no.
You see, you knew before me that it wasn't right for you. I went on for 30 years in business and finance, which is
that's amazing.
It's quite a long time, isn't it?
Yeah.
I was going to ask you what sort of fun you were up to, because I was trying to think about, it was like kind of a Manchester rave scene, or was it like Verve symphonies in the pub, or like a Spice album kind of club do, but it was like in the pub. That's where you were drinking into excess.
I'm just taking a deep breath here, thinking that if my children listen to this, all the things that I'm telling them, even though they ignore me now, they're definitely going to ignore me, aren't they, after this? But I don't know. I suppose given that you're not a Premier League footballer and a Kardashian, probably the chances of them listening to this podcast are zero. So we'll, I'll go with the truth. And yes, I tried all of those things. And
you did. It wasn't one of them. It was all of them. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I tried all of them, but I think the pub culture was where my family and my friends were, and at that particular point in time, a lot of business was done in the pubs, and proper actual business, not just drug selling and things like that. You met customers and things, and took them out for a drink
the same
at lunchtime.
Here too. Yeah, like at lunchtime, I used to date a stockbroker, so it was the same. Like you'd take customers out, potential customers or different like companies would take him out. And then after work, you go out again to the bar. Yeah. And it's like all about networking and socializing. And it's all in that atmosphere of the pub.
Yeah.
I used to work after having kind of, 2 or 3 pints on a lunchtime.
Sure.
How is that even possible?
Yeah, they call it a liquid lunch here.
Now.
Wow. I was trying to imagine how you were dressed and you're doing all the things. So you were in full business attire, going to the pub and then getting home late, I imagine.
Yes.
Yeah. And not really getting any good food. That's all pub food.
It is, yes, it is, and no, food wasn't great in those days. It was, there was probably a fair amount of the ready meals had come in, hadn't they, by that sort of time? The processed beef burgers and fish fingers and Findus crispy pancakes, all of those things that you just put in a microwave and press ping for. And all swilled down with a glass of wine. Which is just
helpful
awful,
for digestion.
It?
Oh, yes.
And sleeping probably not so good either.
No, and I think that because everything was so full on, your mind never got to calm down.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's going to affect your health as well, won't it?
Oh, absolutely. But you think you're invincible at that age, don't you?
Yeah, you feel it.
Yeah, you do.
And so I think that you had a scare, didn't you? That your husband your boyfriend at the time, young, I think in his early 20s, just suddenly went lame with rheumatoid arthritis.
Yeah, he did.
Can you describe that and what that was like for you that when that happened?
Well, it was a complete shock for a start off, because he was, played football a few times a week. He was, in his early 20s and fit. And he just went overnight to being unable to get himself out of bed with just hideous pain in his knees.
Wow.
And so we were due to get married that year as well. And that's kind of not really how you want to start your married life.
You're like, wait a second.
So you broke up with him and you found someone who wasn't lame, and moved on. That's good. Okay, so next question.
No, but what? So he went to bed. He went to bed and he just woke up and like couldn't get out of bed.
His knees hurt.
Exactly.
It was like just literally overnight.
Literally overnight. And because he'd never had anything wrong with him before, it was all a bit of a shock. And so went to the doctors. And they took some blood tests and came back a few days later and said, you've got rheumatoid arthritis. Basically, you'll be living with this for the rest of your life. And the best thing we can do is give you some medication to try and keep the symptoms under control. And I sort of read the little pamphlets that come with these bits of medication.
Yeah.
And the side effects were just absolutely mortifying. Yeah, it's a liver damage.
Impotence.
Thank you.
Impotence. You'd think by now you'd know the difference. 4 years of marriage, the difference between impetus and impotence. Really.
I can't remember if that one was on there or not, but
liver damage, immediate death.
Do you know, it was like you can either have pain and arthritis in your knee or die this slow and lingering death over a number of years. And I've never been good at accepting things that I don't like, and so I just thought there's got to be something better than this. But when we asked the doctor, they just said, no, that's it, that's all there is. And so in those days we didn't have the internet at home, and so I had to go to the local library and go through the books there, and I found one that claimed to cure arthritis. And so I read it sort of from cover to cover, and it was basically what we now know is a Mediterranean diet, but with some extra bits and pieces cut out. Cut out some acidic foods, definitely no processed food. Use organic food wherever you can. And for us, again, in those days, we didn't have, other than what Grandad grew on his allotment, you couldn't get organic food in the supermarkets. That was
But that's a really good point, though. I've heard chefs talk about organic food, and they said, well, in the old days, that was just food. That's what organic food was food. And so this idea of processing food and dousing it with herbicides and pesticides, it's a newfangled. It's not the way food was.
No, it certainly wasn't the way food was when I was growing up. But by the time I'd grown up and got to that particular point, then they had started dousing everything with pesticides and fertilizers, and so it just meant that whatever you were eating those kind of things as well. But by changing his diet like that, so all the pot noodles and beer had to go.
I was about to say delicious, but go on. Sorry, I keep going in the wrong direction.
I think looking back to his face at the time, no pot noodles, no beer. It was like, oh my God, really? But within a week, he was kind of up and walking and getting back to normal. And within 2 weeks, he was completely back to normal. And
by changing his diet, just
by changing his diet like that.
Oh, goodness.
It was, if I hadn't have seen it myself, I perhaps would have been a bit more skeptical, but it was actually quite miraculous, the impact that it had. And so then after that, we've spent many, many years just trying to tweak it, because obviously he was really keen to get beer back in his diet.
Back into his diet, wheat-based diet.
And some of the other things that had to be taken out early on, like tomatoes and some of the dairy foods.
Oh, acid,
the acidic foods they took out. But what we've kind of done over the years is just experiment with that sort of thing a bit, and put back what I would class as the healthy kind of foods. And actually now he just eats them all, and none of them have any impact. So I think it's about getting your system used to being able to cope with those kind of things.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of times, like with diet, it's a bit of a like a buildup,
Yeah.
And so like your system kind of keeps getting more and more acidic, say, and then it hits like this point that's like the breaking point.
Yeah.
And you almost have to do a complete restart. And then once you kind of like clean everything out and, reset everything, then the foods that like initially were bothering you don't bother you.
No.
But like if you were to like only eat those foods again, you would have another like big problem.
I think it's like having the base right, isn't it? So if you've got your base of a lot of clean whole grains and lots of vegetables and healthy fats, and if you've got that base right, then I think the other bits and pieces just don't impact you in that way. But if you haven't got your base diet right, then things that perhaps ordinarily wouldn't give you a problem, your body struggles to cope with.
Yeah,
I wonder if it's sort of similar to being allergic to your environment, where you say you're allergic to milk or dairy or chocolate, and then you introduce a dog, and then you've got a cat, and then you've got all of this dander, and then something comes up in the environment like hay fever, and then the whole thing just falls apart for you. And it seems like that there was maybe a relationship there to how your husband was suffering with rheumatoid arthritis. Did he also have allergies, or was it just his diet was poor for him?
It was just his diet, just poor diet.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think with rheumatoid arthritis,
it was very poor.
Yeah,
it was very poor in those days. He'd grown up again with his mum cooking everything from scratch and having a really good diet probably until his mid-teens.
Right.
And then it was kind of like freedom, and out he went and got the pot noodles and beer and pizzas and all that.
I'd heard once, and I may be kind of just flying off the deep end here, but I had heard once that one of the problems with human beings is that in the last 10,000 years we've kind of gone from a hunter-seeker, a hunter-gatherer kind of diet to entirely grass-based, which is to say wheat, rice, other sorts of grasses, and
barley.
I'm gonna stop with wheat and rice, I think, and that we just weren't used to as a species that much sugar. And that we really went to a sugar-based diet, and then things like rheumatoid arthritis and inflammation come from all of this, all these grasses that we eat.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something to that, but I think a lot of the problems with nutritional science is there are a lot of these theories, but it's really difficult to actually prove any of them. And so I think, we've had all of these things, haven't we, in the past where, oh my gosh, fat is bad, don't eat anything with fat in. And then, time progresses, we have more research and more science, and then we realize, well, no, actually it's not. You need to be eating those essential fats. Just don't eat the fake processed stuff that is really bad for you. And I think, sugar is another one of those things now where it's, oh my words, don't eat any sort of sugar. But my view on that is if it's a natural sugar, for instance, in a whole food like a fruit or something like that, then the body has evolved to cope with and deal with that. But what it hasn't evolved to cope with is, as you say, the excess amount of carbohydrates from one source be it wheat or rice that we eat, and that gets converted to sugar by the body, and it certainly hasn't evolved to cope with adding spoonfuls of sugar into every meal and on everything we eat.
Like a cinnamon toast, that'd be nice. Good.
Yeah.
And I think also
or sweet soy sauce on rice, which is our son's favorite.
That's his favorite. I mean, to that point, it's also the like when we were talking about the processed food, like the different processing methods that we have, where, you know, especially in the United States, it's not so popular. In Canada, I think is actually illegal in Canada, but and probably in Britain too, because they're a little bit more forward. But where they condense that high fructose corn syrup.
Oh yeah, that's.
They take like the sugar from the corn and like turn it into like a super sugar.
Corn was the other one I wanted to use.
Yeah. And then they put that in like everything.
We do put it into every single thing.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And I think that's where, unfortunately, people get so addicted to these foods, and they find them really difficult to because your taste buds change.
Yeah.
And they change both ways as well. You know, I've found I cut out sugar probably about 10 years ago, that kind of, you know, added sugar. And now I'm just not interested in eating it. I'd far rather have, you know, a nice plate of fruit and unsweetened yogurt. That's what my taste buds want me to eat now. But they also go the other way as well. You know, if you start feeding yourself the added sugar all the time, then that's what your body craves.
Yeah. I had heard that it was the sugar industry that was pushing the anti-fat piece in the 80s.
I read that too.
I had also heard that I'm not sure what book I read this in. I don't know if it was Guns, Germs, and Steel or something like that. But it was that when a jam was being exported to Britain from say the States, that they had to put 40% or more sugar into the jam for it to sell than when they sold it to Europe. The Europeans had a far less interest in sugar than Great Britain did.
Right.
And it was really interesting, that how culture can develop an appetite and then have all of these, after effects from it.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I mean, I know they're catching up now, but when you look at the prevalence of disease and obesity and sugar consumption, Britain is. It's not as bad as the States, but it's well ahead of a lot of our, you know, European counterparts that have a much more traditional diet.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Even like if Starbucks, you know, the difference between getting like a latte in Canada versus a latte, like a soy milk latte, say.
In the States, even
in the States, here in Canada, I think they use unsweetened soy milk. Or they use maybe like a low sweet, I don't know. But compared to the States, it's like
everything's sweetened, isn't it?
It's sweet. It's way sweeter. And I'm like, this is the exact same drink. And why does it taste so sugary here?
Even bread is sweetened.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Which is just absolutely bonkers, isn't it?
Yeah, because I also cut out sugar. Like mainly, I mean, of course.
you have some treats
but I tend not to. I don't crave it. It's been a long time actually, like since I was a teenager or like in my early 20s. Yeah. It's been a long time since I've like really been into anything sweet at all. Even like fruit and stuff, I'm not a big fan of.
Really? Oh, I like fruit.
Yeah. And so I'm really sensitive to it. Like I really can taste the sugar. If there's sugar, extra sugar in anything, I'm always like, oh,
it's
this
too
is
sweet
really
for you.
sweet.
Yeah. But it does just show, doesn't it, how you change in terms of your taste buds.
Yeah, you get sensitive.
Yeah.
Didn't you say that you felt that you had a sugar sensitivity, like an actual serious sensitivity to it, that it made you?
Yeah, it makes me it spikes my blood sugar up.
Yeah.
And then it drops it. Somehow that drop down makes me like really nauseated.
Oh, okay.
Like I feel, and then I have it like, if I have sugar, it puts me on that like blood sugar roller coaster.
Yeah.
Where like
Well,
I'm
it
just
does,
not
doesn't
feeling
it?
good all day.
Yeah.
And I just feel really sensitive to it. So that's why I stopped, because I was like, this is really like not good for me.
No. But you see, I think, I mean, maybe the yoga helped you with this in terms of you being more in tune with your body and more in tune with what it's telling you. Whereas I think a lot of people just ride it out, don't they? And then they continue to eat it, and eventually they just kind of adapt. Whereas because you're a little bit more in tune with what your body's saying, maybe you were able to sort of say, hang on a minute, this is not great for me. I'm going to stop, which is a really good thing to be able to do, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think some people just process like, I mean, sugar or fat or alcohol or whatever, like we just process things slightly differently, right?
Oh,
and
definitely.
So, like for me, I just don't process sugar well.
Yeah.
Or maybe I process it too well and it like creates a chaotic atmosphere
I think
inside.
people think that they process it well at times, but actually in the background it's causing disease and problems and issues that pop out later in life because they haven't kind of tuned into that, and so it causes the problems later on for them. But I think that's been one of the biggest, most interesting discoveries in nutrition recently, in terms of finding out about the gut microbiome and the fact that everybody's is so individual. It's as individual as your fingerprint. And so, even though you guys live together, you'll have different microbiomes, and what affects you, Harmony, might not affect you, Russell. And so it's, this is kind of why these one-size-fits-all diets and cures, don't generally tend to work, because they don't work for everyone in the same way. And if you just blindly follow the rules and what's worked for somebody else, then it ends up creating more problems than it's assisting.
Yeah.
Is that what you do then? Do you offer advice and counsel to people who are interested in improving their diet or who have an affliction, say?
Yes. So, generally, what happens is I'll have people complete a food diary for me over a week, and then I'll have a look at their the things that they're eating, and then they'll complete a questionnaire for me as well. So they'll tell me, what it is that they're worried about and what it is that they're looking to achieve, and the medical history, so that we can have a look at that. But I think one of the problems with nutrition is that as a society, we're very used to going to the doctors when something's gone wrong and being given a pill to take. And I think that is a quick and easy solution. But working on your diet, and it takes effort. It takes
so
effort
hard
to cook things from scratch. It takes effort to eat cleanly and stop yourself, drinking too much wine and eating too much chocolate. It does take effort, and it's a lot harder to do that than it is to pop along and take a tablet. And I think that often people don't look at it until they become ill.
And sometimes it's like it's gone so far that the cure of changing things is so drastic that people can't even their habits are so ingrained they can't even wrap their head around changing them at that point, right?
Well, you see people, don't you, that that have diabetes and things like that, and they're coming to the point where they're going to have the lower limbs amputated, but the diet is so ingrained that they just don't want to change. And for when it hasn't affected you like that, you find it really hard to understand how somebody could be looking at a risk like that and not being able to say to themselves, look, I'm just not going to have this anymore, I'm going to change. But I think a lot of the addictiveness of some of these foods and the ways of life and the patterning that we have is so strong that it's really difficult, particularly if somebody's not well, it's really difficult to find the strength to do that, especially if you're on your own and if the health system is just saying, here, take this pill. And, you know, a lot of the medications, while some of them, you know, have some great benefits and are absolutely essential at times, a lot of the ones that are taken, there are perhaps some alternatives that could be looked at instead to avoid the side effects. And really, it would be good to give those kind of things a chance first, and then if they don't work, you know, then you know, look at maybe medication. But I think we do it the other way around, don't we? We go for the medication, and then when we get desperate, look at nutrition and diet.
One of the things that that really surprised me the most about living out east in Taiwan, for example, which is actually west of here, but in Taiwan, it was expected of me, just like everyone else there, because we're all on the public health system, to go to the doctor about once a week or once every 2 weeks. And people said, well, have you been to the doctor yet this week? It's a Chinese medical doctor, of course. And you go to the Chinese medical doctor and they scrape the side of your skin, they suction your flesh, you know, they give you some herbs or herbs, as you will. And then they stick little needles in you all over your body. And all of that
acupuncture.
Yeah. All of that done to get the heat and inflammation out of your body as a regular tonic on the regular. And it's really sort of struck me and stayed with me, like, this is really what a doctor is for, which is to say preventative medicine, as you said, rather than, you know, just cutting something out when it goes bad. You know, why don't we get the heat out of the body so nothing gets trapped in there?
Yeah, it's a great way of looking at it, and I think that, you know, that's unfortunately where our health systems in the West have arrived at. Everything is about treatment and not about prevention. And, you know, whilst I don't know very much about Taiwanese doctors, it seems like a better thing to do. So to have a regular, natural way of keeping on top of your health and your inflammation before, you know, just letting it get out of control and it making you ill.
I do, when I'm watching the Olympics or I'm watching professional sports, I do love to see a cupping mark on an athlete. I always like, oh, there you go, good on you, getting your acupuncturist to have a look-see and get that heat out before anything goes bad. And like, it's like free advertising for Chinese medicine. It's good.
But it's been going on, hasn't it, for thousands and thousands of years. And I think that
since we've started eating grains, it's like, wait a second, we've got too much heat in the body, so we're going to have to do something about this. We're not going to stop eating rice or corn or wheat, then we better get the heat out of the body that's building up, or we're going to get diabetes or rheumatoid arthritis or whatnot. Other sorts of inflammatory diseases.
Yeah, they are. And I think that's sort of the problem with us in the West, in that we want everything to be scientifically proven. And it's a lot easier to scientifically prove something in terms of, I don't know, how a component of a food or a drug works on the body systems than it is to prove some of these more subtle energy types of treatments. And so I think for many, many, many years in the West, we just dismissed them, didn't we, as being hocus pocus, a bit of odd magic, which is really a shame, because, you know, there's obviously a lot of useful things in there that we could take from.
So I'm curious, what was it that took you out of finance and into nutrition? How did you make that transition?
Well, I think the fascination then. So after Andrew was up and running again and back to his normal life, I just kind of forgot about it a bit.
Right.
You know, we carried on eating well as I thought, and then I just carried on with my career. But then I was diagnosed with a malignant melanoma, which is a really nasty, invasive skin cancer.
Yeah.
And at the time, my children were 2 and 4, and you know, I was petrified that they would grow up without their mum. And so I had it cut out, but in the back of my mind, I couldn't understand, you know, I was in my 30s, and so why would somebody with a healthy diet, so I thought, and healthy-ish lifestyle, why would they get something like this? And I think as well, because of the type of person that I am, I need to have some control over things. So I needed to do something about it, you know, rather than just say, oh, right, okay, that's it. It's been cut out. I'm good. I'll just ignore it now. You know, I needed to understand in my head why it could have happened and what I needed to do to stop it happening again.
Had you been practicing yoga at all or anything at this point, or just completely in finance?
Well, I was completely in finance, but I had tried yoga. I've always felt really drawn to it.
Yeah.
But I really struggled to find a type of yoga that suited me. You know, a lot of the types of yoga that I tried were very much a wonderful bendy ex-dancer or gymnast on the stage looking absolutely amazing, whilst you know, everybody else grunted and panted in front, trying their best to get into any kind of position. And I'm not a naturally flexible person. So, you know, I never found them particularly inspiring, because at that point in time, I'd completely missed the point of yoga and I needed to be good at it, or I thought I had to be good at it.
Yeah. Sure. Lots of people come to class thinking that, right? Like,
yeah.
I mean, you want to feel good, and to feel good, you need to do good in the thing that you're applying yourself to.
Exactly. And you've just got it completely the wrong way around. And so I kept still being called back to it. And so I kept trying. But then a couple of years before, when I was pregnant with my daughter, my neighbour, who's an Iyengar teacher, said, oh, come to my class. If you're pregnant, it'll really help you with the birth. And so obviously I didn't need asking twice about that. I'm there. And so the contrast of going to a class like that was just incredible. You know, she wandered serenely around the room. It's a bit like a Mysore room, you know, wandered serenely around, helping people with their practice, you know, as opposed to demonstrating how wonderful she looked at the front.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's quite a bit different, isn't it? That just the
different.
change in perspective on where the teacher stands in the room can have such a difference on you.
Yeah. Well, it no longer then became important what my practice looked like. It was more about what it felt like, which is a massive change, isn't it? Massive.
Totally. Yeah, that's a big shift internally. And
as
a dancer, that was actually the thing that drew me to the yoga practice, is practicing in a room without mirrors. And also without someone demonstrating, like, I mean, maybe demonstrating one or two, but all of my teachers were not like flexible show off teachers that I started with. They were all kind of like, you know, not your typical like yoga journal cover girl. They were like men or like older women or things. So for me, it was such a switch as a dancer, looking at the mirror all the time and always evaluating yourself, like, what do I look like? Does this look good? So much pressure from that that mirror, it's like your worst critic there all the time criticizing you.
Yes.
But that's also what's so nefarious about social media is that you are actually reintroducing a mirror into your practice.
No, I agree. I think it's insidious. But then like switching to like, how does this feel in my body?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like, that cured so many things for me, is that tuning in rather than looking for external validation.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And looking at yourself in the mirror and comparing that to the other person and thinking,
exactly,
why don't I look like that?
Why am I not that skinny? Why don't my legs turn out like that? Why isn't my leg that high? It just goes on and on and on.
Yeah, it does. It does.
The other day I was thinking about the Ukraine and President Zelensky and a person used a phrase that really struck me, that he had a real spine. He's got real spine, that guy.
Yeah.
Whereas some of these Republicans back home who are in the back pocket of Putin, they're spineless.
Yeah.
They're spineless. And I was thinking about, in yoga we like people to have a big back bend, which is to say spineless. And if you're sturdy, then you won't have a back bend. You'll be quite, stiff and strong. And we've really flipped that on its lid. This kind of notion that if you're a bit stiff, well, then there's no value to your practice.
Yeah.
Yes.
But actually, what you are is strong. You're sturdy and strong, and there's a real value to that, and we should put value onto it.
Yeah, and it's I think it's as well valuing that everybody's different and everybody has something that they can do, and that they will be good at. And I think that just following what somebody else is doing, you're never going to be the same as them, are you? And you're never going to be able to look like that, whether it's good or bad or indifferent. So it's just nice to be able to start and think about what you might be able to do and just concentrate on how that makes you feel.
Yeah. I want to go back to your story.
Yeah, please. Yeah. I had a biographical detail I wanted to ask about, but go ahead.
I've forgotten where I was now.
So you tried the Iyengar class.
That's right.
When you were pregnant with your daughter, and then
this is my follow-up question. So you started studying with Joey Miles at one point.
I did. I still do.
Nice.
I think what happened was, after I'd been to the Iyengar classes, I had both of my children, and then I went back to working full time. And so there was just no time to fit in going to yoga classes. And the yoga that I did then was from a DVD in the lounge, just whenever I could manage it, until the children got a little bit older. And then I looked again for a class, because I like a class. It's nice to have a little community, isn't it? And so I wandered into a class not knowing what Ashtanga yoga was. But I just thought, well, it says yoga, so I'll give it a try. And I went, and I absolutely loved it. I'd never had, even though I really enjoyed the Iyengar, I'd never had anything that managed to quiet my mind in that kind of a way. So even though I felt like it was doing good for my body, it also was just calming my mind down, because it works at 120 miles an hour, my mind. I find it really hard to slow it down and switch it off. And after that first class, just lying down, taking rest, my mind was just completely still. And I can't ever remember having felt like that before. And so, I loved it. And then continued with those classes, and eventually started going to Joey, probably about 4 or 5 years ago.
Nice.
Well, I don't mean to bring up a tyke again, but what we're learning is that an exercised dog is a well-behaved dog.
Is that right?
Yeah,
okay.
Tired dog is well-behaved. So, being exercised can just quiet the mind,
Yeah.
And so it's like, and so maybe that's just really what you needed, was to really kind of work some things out, and then you could really just let it go.
Yeah, and I think it's the focus as well, because you're focusing, aren't you, on what you're doing physically and the drishti and the breathing. It's just having to make your mind shut up and concentrate, which is always been so difficult for me. I'm always thinking about 4 different things at once, and you just can't do that, can you, when you're doing Ashtanga?
Yeah, it's such good training. It's such good mental training for like dharana, concentration. Like, okay, you got to focus on these things.
Yeah, it is. It's really good, and I think you said you knew Joey quite well, and so you'll know that he's really good in terms of trying to adapt the practice to suit his students in order to give them the best chance of doing what's good and right for them. I mean, he works really hard, but he's it's like, for me, I was 47 when I started Ashtanga.
Wow.
And
goodness,
like I've said, like a brick. And so therefore I found it so hard to do some of the forward bending and back bending. And so,
you're like, I'm a non-bender.
But it's
I don't bend in any direction.
But any time that you're looking at growth in your practice, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't. It's not a wonderful feeling to, like, once you get to your ankles, say in a back bend, it doesn't suddenly feel great once you get to your knees. It's still hard, and it's still nauseating. And so if you're just trying to do your favorite posture, that Dhanurasana, that wheel pose, where you're lying on your belly and you take your ankles and you lift up, that's just as hard once you get to your knees. It still feels the same, no matter how the range of motion.
Yeah.
But you can just keep taking it to a new edge, right?
The edge is what
just keep moving.
That's what I'm trying to say. The edge is not nice.
Yeah. I do get what you're saying, and I think that's I don't know, maybe it's one thing I'll never experience, because I don't seem to make the things that absolute beginners find wonderfully relaxing, like Paschimottanasana and things like that, where you just see people just relax in that, and for me that's absolute torture.
Yeah, no, I've never liked that one. No,
I agree. Paschimottanasana was never my favorite posture. I hated it.
It's not nice. I would feel like little nubby nausea in my calves, and it would make me want to be sick.
Yeah,
it'd make me so angry.
Even yesterday was the same.
Yeah.
It's funny though. I know what you mean though, because some people are just natural forward folders, and they're just like feel really like relaxed and good there.
Yeah, and you look at them, and there's almost like this sereneness rising up from them.
No.
They're panting.
They're spineless. They're spineless, Nicola.
Come on. No judgment. This is a judgment-free zone.
It's a judgment call, is what I'm making.
Yeah.
But so then tell us. So after your cancer scare, you had the surgery, you had it removed, then that took you into a whole other career.
Well, it did, because initially, when I looked at what it could be that was wrong, I was stuck, because I thought I ate healthily, but actually when I started researching the foods that assisted cancer, there were whole food groups missing from my diet. We'd never had lentils or pulses. I mean, as you can imagine, they don't go well with gravy and mash, and so therefore they're not a dietary staple in Yorkshire.
Or the puddings. They don't go well with the puddings either.
No.
I could see putting lentils inside of a Yorkshire pudding with gravy on.
You could maybe make a lentil batter, but
sound
maybe.
like a pie.
I don't know. It sounds complicated.
Maybe. But anyway, in those days, they just weren't even there. Nuts were not something that we ate unless they were covered in chocolate.
Oh, that sounds nice. Yeah.
Yeah, they were. They were really nice. And so, there were just whole groups just missing from my diet. So in terms of diversity, I hadn't got any of the full range of things that I should have had. And like you said, my whole grains were wheat.
Yeah.
Right.
That was it.
Right.
End of.
That's your whole grain.
Yeah. We ate brown bread, and so we thought that was good enough. But that was the limit of it.
That's nice.
Yeah. So, I was quite happy and that I knew what I could do in terms of that. And so, I went off and looked at that. But I think the problem was that if you look at nutritional science, if you look for science to support an argument, there seems to be a study supporting every single argument. And, I wanted to understand, how do you cut through all of that? How do you know which ones to believe and which ones not to believe? And so that's why I decided to go back and do another degree, then this time in nutrition.
Did you do that at Leeds?
I did that at Leeds.
They're called loiners, the people from Leeds. Did you know that? And I thought that was also rather suggestive. Loiners from Leeds.
I don't know where you get this information from.
No,
I've never heard that one.
I do my research and
Google.
I discover it.
You must have your own range of websites that you look on.
We shouldn't talk about the range of websites I look on, to be honest. One thing that you said that I thought was really lovely, you were talking about sort of combining your interest in diet and your interest in yoga, and you talked about the sort of some unhealthy choices that you thought you saw in the habits in yoga practitioners. And I wonder if you could talk about that for us.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of think that everybody that does yoga will be really conscious of their health, and a lot of them are. So many people work really hard to look after their health, but there were two basic themes that I seem to have just observed whilst I've been doing both. And one of them is the junk food veganism.
Yeah.
That sounds like our dinner last night.
Yeah. It's true.
we had some kind of fried cauliflower, and we thought that was going to be healthy for us.
And fried.
It might have been
fried plant-based meat.
Fried plant-based meat. Yeah.
Well, we baked it, but I think it was pre-fried. I don't know. It was freezer.
Right. Okay.
That's the problem. The processed food, right? It's so challenging to get processed food out of your diet, even like if you're like conscious about your health, because you see, it takes so much time to make food.
Oh, it takes so much time to make food, and that's why people just don't do it enough. But I think that one of the things that you can do is, like really simplify things. Yeah. So I think in terms of the junk food veganism, a lot of the fake meat and the fake cheese and those kind of things that people put in there, thinking that they need to have that for protein.
Right.
When actually there are, nuts and seeds and edamame beans, other types of beans and pulses. Yeah.
It's going to be difficult for our listeners at home to kind of parse this, because we say we don't have enough time to cook, but we can watch we can binge watch all of The Last Kingdom, for hours. And like, we don't have enough time to cook. And I was like, we could.
I know we have lost our focus, I think, in some ways. And, you can spend.
I want to see you in the kitchen.
And I do like to cook.
Yeah. Healthy food.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Anyway, we're having a domestic.
And I was like, really rather unfair. I do like to cook.
I think that conversation goes on in every household, doesn't it?
Because I think also the problem is if you work like 15 hours a day, you don't want to then cook food.
Yeah.
And then you're eating so late because it takes like an hour, because I'm not very fast to cook a meal.
Yeah, it does. And then you've got all the clearing up to do from it, haven't you? You know, whereas if you get one of those packets and shove it in the oven, there's no clearing up, there's no effort.
Yes, we just zip onto the baking sheet, into the oven.
Yeah.
Done.
And we were proud of ourselves that we hadn't fried it, to be honest.
Yeah, we baked it.
Woohoo!
But like at the same time, I'm like, this is kind of junk food.
It's not food.
But at least it's cauliflower.
Yeah, I know. But, you know, I think the difference is you know and you realise that you know...
It's not healthy, really.
Yeah.
It's not pretend healthy.
But, you know, you can't be an angel 100% of the time, can you?
No.
You know, you are going to have times when you do just need to revert to something that's quick and easy. But I think the problem is a lot of people believe the marketing around that sort of thing, and they think that it is healthy, and they think that, you know, it's okay to eat that sort of stuff all of the time. And I think that, you know, that's one of the things that I've observed.
You know what I noticed too? You brought up the vegan cheese. I just want to talk about for a second, because there's like almost zero protein in it. Like most vegan cheeses have zero protein.
Yeah.
So all you're eating again is fat and carbs. Like,
and not even proper fat and carbs. You're eating the bad stuff, you know, the overprocessed stuff that makes you ill. And so, you know, I think for me, that's kind of where I came to, in that I just thought, do you know what? If I want cheese, I'm going to have cheese, real cheese.
Yeah.
And I know that some people can't do that for ethical reasons, and they don't want to do that. But
or
I think
they're
as long as
intolerant.
Yeah, there is that too. Yeah. And I think that it's just about, isn't it, perhaps finding some other alternatives that are not going to do them harm.
Yeah. Or like, or at least understanding that if you're eating it, it's not healthy for you, that it's like kind of like a treat. It's like having like, you know, chips or
it's a treat.
You know,
it's
something like
meal.
That. It's not
a treat.
Yeah, it's not like a healthy substitute. It's kind of like an unhealthy substitute.
But, you know, that's really so difficult with all of the money that these food companies spend on the marketing, because they do, don't they? They put it in a packet with some green leaves and green looking things on there, and you know, try and persuade people that it's healthy. And I think that's kind of where the problem lies. It's difficult for people.
Totally.
And what about the other end of the spectrum that you mentioned of, say, just not eating at all?
That to me was just unbelievably shocking, in that, you know, you meet women who have lost their periods, and, you know, that you see some people who have just remarkably thin. And the reason behind what they're doing, you know, I mean, there are certain doctors and health, I'm struggling to call them experts, but certain scientists that will recommend fasting for certain reasons.
Right, like intermittent fasting.
Yeah. But I mean, that's different, because that's eating within a certain window. So you don't, you know, fast for sort of a long period of time. But the, you know, the reasons for that are probably not binding in Marichasana, and probably not lifting up into headstand, are they? It's just...
I would like to do that again someday.
Be able to float with ease.
But is that actually really worth your health?
Yeah.
You know, it's and I think maybe that's where some of the Instagram and some of the social media and internet things don't help these situations, because actually when you see a normal class of normal people, how many combined in Marichas D?
Yeah, maybe like
hardly anybody.
Yeah, and 30%.
Oh, you mean there's the population in a yoga class is quite a bit skewed. It's very different from the general population.
It is, but
you're talking about 99% cannot do Marichas D. Then there's the 1% of us in a yoga room,
and still only like
50,
maybe 30 to 50%, depending on what level of yoga it is.
Yeah, I know. And so I don't think that people realize how incredibly rare it is to be able to do that, and it's certainly not worth sacrificing your health to be able to do that. And so, it's difficult, isn't it? Because you can't judge people without knowing the reasons, and you can't.
Yeah, it brings up such an interesting conversation in my mind, though, because so much of the yoga philosophy and what sort of yoga is geared to, actually, even from a sort of traditional kind of viewpoint, is this reining in of the senses, right? This drawing in of the senses,
withdrawing the mind from the senses,
and discipline and control and asceticism, and all these things are very much connected to the practice of yoga. And I think Ashtanga is a very intense and deep kind of practice
and asceticism.
Of asceticism and controlling the mind and controlling the senses. And if you want to get good at it, you have to do all of those things, right? Good, physically, let's say.
Yeah.
And so it has this kind of bent to it already that I think kind of lures you in down this path. If I'm going to be a good yogi, if I'm going to actually do this spiritual discipline,
if I'm going to be good,
a
good person.
Yeah. Whether it's
we're back to that thing that we mentioned before, aren't we? About is that the point of yoga, being good at it?
Yeah. But even not even just physical achievements, but even can I control my senses? Can I discipline my lifestyle to the point where I'm only eating this amount of these things? Do you know what I mean? There's just so much regulation.
Can I be considered a good person by others?
Right. And it is sort of a fascinating thing, because we do kind of have this little thing in our brain where we equate the two together, especially in the Ashtanga yoga, the Ashtanga realm. The Ashtanga yoga realm.
That's a good word.
Yeah. Ashtanga. But also it happens in other types of intense meditation type practices also. You could look at the Vipassana system, and if you're on a 10-day retreat or a 20-day retreat, you're having a small breakfast, you're waking up at 4 a.m. in the morning, you're finishing your medium-sized lunch, small lunch before noon, and then you're not eating again until 7 a.m. After you've already meditated for 3 hours. And your senses become so withdrawn that even food kind of loses an attraction. And even though the food's super healthy, and I think it's an interesting discipline to go down, but there is something there with this idea of controlling the senses and withdrawing and making your life so simplified and so ascetic, and that's equated with being a good yoga practitioner.
Yeah. And I think there's probably a difficulty in knowing when the line has been crossed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In terms of if it's damaging your health and it's stopping your body functioning properly, then, it's that's probably a point where you need to be questioning whether it's the right thing to do.
I was in
I think that's a great question.
I was in a study for Yoga Journal about 10 years ago. And they were measuring our, our heart function. And so they put us on the treadmill, and they had us wear these heart monitors while we practiced and all that. It was interesting. And then they did a body fat test. And I came out at that time like 10% body fat, and I was immediately dismayed. I was like, "Oh, I am fat, aren't I?" And the guy said, "Look, what do you? I don't know what you're complaining about, because when you have a body fat of 10% or more, then that means that you're going to be much less sick," he said to me. That the problem with cyclists and the problem with these extreme athletes when their body fat goes down to 3%, 2%, is that they get a lot of colds. They get sick a lot, and because they can't keep their immune system healthy. Yeah. And so I think it says a lot about what you're talking about, is that you really are doing damage to your immune system if you're not keeping your weight up.
Yeah, you do need a level of the body naturally, for survival purposes, needs a store. Otherwise, it starts panicking and thinking, "Oh my gosh, I need to be eating more. I need to be craving more sugary foods, etc." Just in order to build those stores back up again. Yeah. And so, it does make you wonder whether it's doing you any good at all to be dropping below those levels and sending your body into those kind of crisis situations on a a permanent basis. Because if you're starving yourself to that point, then that's what you're doing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like on every extreme, like whether it's like not eating enough and not getting the right nutrition, or maybe eating too much or having too much of the wrong nutrition. Yeah. There's like disease, right? And so there's must be sort of a little sweet point somewhere in the middle of these two extremes.
It's balance, isn't it? It's like everything in life. It's about balance. It's about, looking after yourself most of the time, and then just knowing, keeping a connection with your body, so that you're listening to what it's doing, and listening to when it's telling you something's not right, and also keeping a connection with your food. Where is it coming from? Is it natural? It's kind of impossible to have a connection with a microwave dinner, isn't it? Whereas if you've got some carrots that have been lovingly grown
to the microwave dinner.
And like maybe it's okay to have a little bit of vegan junk food.
Exactly. It's all about balance. Every once in a while, then, why not? And I think, that there are a lot of studies around happiness, and in terms of, eating. And I know I've fallen foul of this myself in the past, in terms of having real enjoyment out of eating in a social situation, and, connecting again with people and the food and, the whole community situation. I've been at points, particularly after the cancer, where, if something hadn't been handmade and 100% organic, it used to throw me into turmoil, and I'd think, right, I need to go now and have 10 overpriced green smoothies in order to detox myself from that cake or that, that pie that I'd eaten. And it's losing the big picture, isn't it? About, that's going to do me way more damage, creating all that low level stress, than eating a non-organic carrot. You've just got to get a balance, haven't you, in life, and try and keep an eye on that.
Yeah. You mentioned something else in your bio, just to kind of finish up, and it was really interesting, this structure that you described using and applying to your science. I think it was called Vega, and I wonder if you could talk more about Vega and how you use it and what you do with it.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'll say that Vega testing certainly isn't supported by the health system here. And in fact, it's one of those things that they would say, it's alongside alternative therapies and you're probably wasting your money. But for me,
with that said,
it really works in that it works.
What is it?
It works along traditional Chinese medicine acupuncture sites by sending like a mini electrical impulse and measuring the resistance at those acupuncture sites.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like a little bit more of a scientific way of giving you a score and a result for each of those things. And so for me, it made sense.
So in the way that my acupuncturist might check my pulse and then he'd get a reading on my chi, this is an instrument that's doing the same thing.
It is.
I see.
And it got a really, really bad press here in the UK because one of the health supplement shops bought these machines and put them in every store and had like the trainees using these so that they could recommend loads of supplements for people to buy.
Dear.
And so therefore after that they just had a really bad name here in the UK. But I went to the effort of finding an actual acupuncturist who'd been properly trained and had many, many years of experience for him to do the readings for me. And because they were a score, that made a lot of sense for me because I think the problem with the other alternative therapies that I tried, I didn't know whether they were working or not. And in my mind, I couldn't just wait to see if cancer came back.
Right.
That just, wouldn't work for me. I wanted to understand what the things were. And because this tests all of the acupuncture sites, it came up with a number of different things for me to work on. One was the gut dysbiosis from not having enough variety and diversity in my diet, which I talked about before. Another was mercury in my fillings, which was really affecting me, and another was negative energies.
Like me, for example. I might bring too much negative energy to your system just by being around me. Harmony's mentioned that before.
But I think the problem is with some of the things like that. So I went to I took the diet on myself, and then I went to my doctor and I said to him, "Is there a test that you can do to confirm whether the mercury in my fillings is actually poisoning me?" And he just gave me a really patronizing look and sort of patted me on the arm and said, "There are a lot of people in the alternative therapy world that try and take advantage of people with cancer. The NHS says mercury is safe, and so don't worry about that." So I thought, and I went away and researched it a little bit more and found that they'd stopped putting mercury fillings in children and pregnant women. And so I was thinking, well, that's kind of telling me that it's not safe. And so, it was just a really difficult and confusing time because there's so much conflicting evidence everywhere. And I think because of the way our health system is geared towards certain advice, whether that fits for you or not, then it's, it was quite difficult really. So I went ahead and had them taken out. I didn't tell the Vega tester that that's what I'd had done. And then when I went back and was tested again, the score had gone right down for that, which to me, just confirmed that it worked for me.
My parents' dentist, he was very into like holistic medicine. And he had them take out all of the mercury fillings and replace them with non-mercury fillings.
Your parents did that?
Yeah. He said, this is completely toxic for your system. And we don't even allow mercury. You don't get mercury fillings in Canada anymore. It's like,
no, I don't think we get them at all
something.
now.
I don't know. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of common knowledge now, but back then probably people were like, yeah, it's just like, no one cares. Right. Same like aluminum, like eating out like the aluminum cans and like understanding what that does and that our systems are absorbing it.
Yeah. And we all cooked in aluminum pans, didn't we, for years and years and years. And, you know, it's kind of like all of those peripheral things that I looked into over the years, you know, like what I cooked in. So now I'd only cook in cast iron or stainless steel, you know, looking at the products that I put on my skin.
Yeah.
They were just full of nasty, nasty chemicals. And back in those days, you just couldn't get, you know, natural chemical-free skincare. There's a lot more of it around now, but it was so difficult at the time. So, you know, it was really quite a journey to go on, but a really fascinating and a really interesting one, which is what inspired me to, you know, to go on and study nutrition again.
That's amazing. And so now your whole career is basically consulting as a nutritionist.
Well, that I'm doing that. I haven't entirely walked away from the finance.
Okay. It pays the bills.
Well, I still really enjoy it. And, you know, I think I've got 30 years of great experience there. And so it's kind of a waste, isn't it, just to let that go. But I'm at the point where there's a few different opportunities, and it's quite hard to pick and choose now. But I'm gonna have to do it, aren't I, at some point?
Yeah, but that's exciting. It's nice.
Yes, it is.
It's exciting when sort of you can transition into new areas of life too. You know,
it is
sometimes a little scary to let go of what you know.
Yeah,
but
you've got to be inspired
about it. Yeah, exactly. You're so inspired by it.
Excited about what you're doing on a daily basis, because I think that's great for your health.
Yeah, 100%.
That's right.
100%.
If someone wanted to work with you on their diet, is there a way that they could get a hold of you and get a consultation, even if they're in Florida?
Florida.
Alberta, say.
Yeah, well, I think at the moment, all I have is my Instagram, which is at the Yummy Yogi. I haven't gone and set up a website and sorted myself out in that respect yet. But
through the Yummy Yogi, they could get a hold of you.
Yeah,
on Instagram.
they can just DM me and I can sort them out. But it's on my list of things to do. I do need to sort out a website, and I do need to get that done. But I just haven't had to yet.
Well, if the Instagram works, you know, what else do you need?
Many people have very successful businesses without a website, believe it or not.
Yeah, I believe it.
Yeah, I suppose they do. Yeah.
It's true. Yeah, it's all about just the connections and the conversations that are being had, right?
Yeah, well, most of people have come to me just from word of mouth.
Yeah.
Because I think nutritionists are quite rare in terms of, you know, I think there are plenty of people, very like yoga, where somebody's done a 1-month course. And
sure.
Yeah, you know, so it's a big difference, isn't it, to somebody who has been properly trained and practiced.
I mean, even, you know, I did a year course. Well, it was actually more like a year and a half when you add on the other advanced sort of coaching courses that I took. But you know, when you do that, when you become like a health coach or a health and wellness coach, which is like a really up and coming area, especially in North America. And I think it's starting to come up even in Britain as well.
Yeah.
You know, your scope of practice is like, you're not there to prescribe or, assess nutritional, like, your scope of practice is not about doing those things. That's for like somebody who has a degree in nutrition or a doctor, or, you're not prescribing or assessing test results or anything like that.
Yeah.
But the benefit is kind of like what we were talking about, I think, how doctors now, it's just like our medical system, so much like people come in, they just like get their pill, their prescription. The doctor has like 3 to 5 minutes that they can spend with them, and they just like send them on their way.
Yeah.
And so it's all about just like trying to band-aid problems. And when you think, if you go back in time to an era a long, long time ago, when there was like more like villages and like the doctor of the village, and he would know everyone and he would understand their lifestyle, and they would all visit together, and people would, it was like a very social thing, being a doctor, and you spent time with people, right? It wasn't so transactional. And I think
it was
that's
much
where like
better.
that's where the health coaching, I think, is why it's so important these days, because they've had so many studies done that, people do better with their health when they have someone that they have a relationship with to support them,
That's so
it's like, I mean, even with you, if someone comes to you and they're like, I want to change my diet, I mean, part of the beautiful thing of working with somebody like you or a health coach, or, is that you have someone you can check in with, and that's going to check in on you and be like, how's it going? What obstacles are coming up for you? What's working? What isn't working? And
it's just that support, isn't it? That's there to help you out.
Yeah, we just don't have that in our medical system. We don't have time for it, and nobody can, especially if it's a public health system, nobody wants to pay for that kind of support or time.
I know. Well, they don't, do they?
No.
Did you ever watch that show when we were kids? It was The Facts of Life.
Yeah.
No.
Very popular in the early 80s in American. And so it was Joe and Blair and
Tootie.
Yeah.
Tootie.
And they were all. We shouldn't forget Natalie as well. And so the four of these girls were in the boarding school together, and they were all kind of trying to find their way. And they had their, the matriarch of the show was this, Miss Garrett.
Yeah,
Miss Garrett was the school nutritionist.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and she was the one that they all went to.
She was
for
like
help.
The house marm.
And they was like, I don't know what to do about this boy, or about, my body.
She's like a guidance counselor, kind of.
She was a guidance counselor. She was their life coach.
Yeah, their life coach.
Because she was the school nutritionist, and she was the one person they could really trust.
What a lovely job to have. But no, they just don't pay, do they, for people to have jobs like that anymore?
No, there's no
it's all
school
about
nutritionist.
Results, isn't it?
Yeah.
All about results.
Yeah. Or just like getting rid of the symptom.
Yes.
And no one's really, like you say, looking at like, well, what's the underlying cause of these problems? What's the underlying cause of these symptoms? Like, let's get to the heart of what's actually creating, that toxicity or hyperacidity.
Yeah. And it's Joe smoking a bit of dope in the parking lot. That's the problem. Well, I just really want to thank you for coming on the show with us, Nicola.
Well,
it's been sweet.
A great conversation. I've really enjoyed it, and I think that has been one of the nicest things about the pandemic, in terms of beforehand we were very restricted to the teachers that were in our locality, and so for instance, I had Joey, and that was it. And since the pandemic, I've been able to practice with Harmony online through Adam Keen's website. I mean, the little business that Adam and Teresa set up, and the guest teachers that they've brought in, it's just been absolutely wonderful, hasn't it, for us all?
Totally.
So it's been really lovely to connect with other people.
I agree. I think that, to me, that was the most exciting thing about the pandemic.
That's a silver lining, doesn't there? That's a silver lining. And also online Mysore. in a morning.
Yeah.
How incredible is that? Roll out of bed and log on, and that's just fantastic with no commute.
Yeah.
I mean, when Adam set that up, it's just been an absolute lifesaver.
He's a jewel.
Yeah. Yeah. And please say hello to Joey too when you see him.
Good old Joey.
I will.
We'll have to bring him on the show.
Does he still have those long dreadlocks? Is he still dreaded?
We saw him without them.
He cut them.
No.
We saw him in Mysore in 2017 and he didn't have dreadlocks.
I didn't recognize him.
Yes, you talked to him.
Didn't know who he was, I think, when we met. So
no,
I haven't
definitely
seen
no
him
dreadlocks.
for decades.
You saw him in 2017 in Mysore. You had a conversation.
No, I never met. No.
I'll ask him. I'll ask him in a few weeks' time. And I'll message you and let you know.
No, I don't think I met him.
It's the aluminum, all that aluminum's
aluminium.
Aluminium?
Aluminium.
It's starting to degrade your memory.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Nicola. It was so wonderful.
Don't turn your computer off. Yeah, whatever you